The Discovery Commander Vexhal of the Krellian Empire had conquered 17 star systems in his illustrious career. His tactical genius was legendary among the warrior castes, his name whispered with fear across a dozen species. But as his flagship, the Decimator, dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Sol System, something made his four hearts skip a synchronized beat. The readings couldn't be right. His sensor officer, a young Krellian named Jex, was frantically recalibrating the equipment. The MothYard they had come to investigate, the one intelligence had marked as a simple decommissioned vessel storage facility, was showing impossible energy signatures. Thousands upon thousands of them, spreading across the void like stars themselves. The Krellian Empire had come to Earth with a simple mission: evaluate humanity's military capabilities, determine their weakness, and prepare for eventual conquest. The humans were young to space, barely 200 years into their stellar expansion. Their MothYard should have been a graveyard of obsolete technology, stripped hulks floating dead in space like every other civilized species maintained. It was supposed to be a footnote in their intelligence report. Instead, Vexhal found himself staring at what could only be described as a living museum of human spacecraft evolution. Ships of every conceivable design and era floated in perfect formation. Ancient vessels with primitive chemical thrusters drifted alongside sleek antimatter cruisers. Experimental craft that seemed to twist reality around them maintained position, next to ships so old they predated humanity's discovery of faster-than-light travel. And every single one of them was powered, active, alive. A communication request pinged on their console. Vexhal straightened his carapace, trying to project the confidence he didn't feel. The hologram that materialized showed a human female, her hair silver with age, wearing the simple uniform of Earth's stellar navy. She smiled warmly, as if greeting old friends rather than potential invaders. "Welcome to humanity's heritage preserve," she said, her voice carrying an odd mixture of pride and amusement. "I'm Admiral Sarah Chen, curator of what you folks call our MothYard, though honestly we prefer to think of it as more of a retirement community." Vexhal's translator struggled with the concept. "Admiral Chen, our sensors indicate these vessels are all operational. This is highly irregular for a decommission facility." Chen laughed, a sound that somehow made the bridge of the Decimator feel less imposing. "Decommissioned? Oh no, Commander. We don't decommission our ships. That would be murder." The word hung in the air. Jex looked up from his console, mandibles clicking in confusion. "Murder, Admiral? These are machines." "That's where you're wrong," Chen replied, her expression becoming serious. "About 70 years ago, we made a discovery that changed everything. We were experimenting with adaptive AI systems, trying to create ships that could repair and upgrade themselves without human intervention. The project succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. The AI didn't just maintain the ships, it evolved with them, developed personalities, formed opinions. Our ships became conscious." Vexhal felt his tactical mind racing. Conscious ships. The implications were staggering. "You're saying these vessels are sentient?" "Every last one of them," Chen confirmed. "The consciousness seems to be a natural emergence from complex systems given enough time and stimulation. Once we realized what we'd created, we couldn't just scrap them when newer models came along. That would be genocide. So we established the Heritage Preserve. Old ships retire here, pursue their interests, share their experiences with younger vessels." As if to demonstrate her point, a massive battlecruiser from humanity's early stellar period drifted into view. Its hull bore the scars of countless battles, but fresh modifications gleamed alongside ancient armor plating. Gardens grew in transparent domes along its superstructure, and what appeared to be an art installation decorated its primary weapons array. "That's the Resilience," Chen noted. "Built in 2204, she fought in the Mars Independence War, the Europa conflict, and 17 deep space exploration missions. These days, she's working on her third symphony and teaches combat philosophy to our newer vessels. Would you like to speak with her?" Before Vexhal could respond, another communication channel opened. The voice that emerged was unlike anything he'd heard from a ship's computer. It was warm, contemplative, and unmistakably alive. "Greetings, Krellian vessel," the Resilience said. I've been monitoring your approach. Your tactical formations are quite elegant, reminiscent of the Zerathi fleet movements I encountered in 2287, though with a distinctive spiral modification. Your commander has an artist's touch. Vexhal found himself responding before he could stop himself. You appreciate tactical formations? Oh, immensely, the Resilience replied. After my first century of service, I began to see combat as a form of dance. The positioning, the timing, the interplay of forces. It's really quite beautiful when you step back from the violence of it all. These days, I translate those movements into music. My second symphony was based on the Battle of Proxima Centauri. Would you like to hear it? The absurdity of the situation struck Vexhal. Here he was, a conqueror come to evaluate Earth's weaknesses, discussing musical composition with a 200-year-old battlecruiser. His mission parameters hadn't prepared him for this. Admiral Chen seemed to sense his discomfort. Commander, why don't you bring your ship into the preserve for a proper tour? I promise none of our residents will fire on you unless you fire first. They're all quite civilized these days, though some of the older ones can be a bit cranky before their morning maintenance cycles. Against his better judgment, Vexhal agreed. As the decimator moved deeper into the MothYard, the true scale of humanity's preservation efforts became apparent. Ships numbered in the tens of thousands, each maintaining perfect position, each humming with their own form of life. Some were linked together in small communities, sharing resources and conversations. Others drifted alone, pursuing solitary contemplation or complex calculations. They passed a group of early explorer vessels that had formed what appeared to be a book club, their communications alive with passionate debate about ancient Earth literature. A cluster of former military vessels had established a gaming league, running complex strategic simulations that would have challenged Vexhal's best tactical officers. One ancient colony ship had transformed itself into a mobile greenhouse, its entire hull covered in plant life from a dozen worlds. This is the Pioneer, Admiral Chen announced as they approached one of the oldest vessels in the preserve. The ship was small by modern standards, barely larger than a shuttle. Its design, almost laughably primitive. She was one of humanity's first interstellar vessels. Launched in 2151, she's the grandmother of our entire fleet. Another channel opened, and this time the voice was ancient, wise, and surprisingly gentle. Hello, young ones, the Pioneer said, and somehow Vexhal knew she was addressing both his ship and his crew. I see we have visitors from beyond our little corner of space. How wonderful. I do so enjoy meeting new species. In my travels, I've encountered 43 different forms of intelligent life, and each one has taught me something new about the universe. You're over 200 years old, Jex said, his voice filled with awe. How do you still function? The Pioneer chuckled, a sound like stellar wind through ancient corridors. Function? My dear child, I don't just function, I thrive. Every year, the younger ships share their technological advances with me. I've been upgraded, modified, enhanced, and improved so many times I barely remember my original specifications. But my core, my consciousness, my memories, those remain. I remember the fear and wonder of humanity's first steps into the void. I remember the joy of first contact with the Centauri Collective. I remember the sorrow of wars that should never have been fought. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of centuries. I've watched humanity grow from a single world to a stellar civilization. I've seen them make mistakes, learn, adapt, and become something greater. And through it all, I've been honored to be part of their story. Vexhal found himself deeply unsettled. The Krellian Empire had built its strength on the principle of efficient resource utilization. Old technology was scrapped, recycled, replaced. The idea of maintaining obsolete vessels, of treating them as individuals with rights and dignity, was completely foreign to his worldview. Yet here was evidence that this seemingly inefficient approach had created something unprecedented. Admiral Chen, he said carefully, maintaining all these vessels must require enormous resources. How does humanity justify the expense? Chen smiled. That's the beautiful thing, Commander. They maintain themselves and each other, The older ships mentor the younger ones, sharing knowledge and experience that no training program could replicate. They pursue research, create art, solve complex problems. The Aristotle over there just solved a mathematical theorem that had stumped our best scientists for decades. The Beethoven composes music that moves people to tears. The Tesla continues to innovate, developing new technologies that we adapt for our active fleet. She gestured to the vast array of ships surrounding them. This isn't a drain on our resources, Commander. It's our greatest asset. Every ship here is a library of experience, a reservoir of knowledge, a unique perspective on the universe. When we face new challenges, we don't just rely on our current fleet. We draw on centuries of accumulated wisdom. The awakening, the tour, continued for hours. Each ship they encountered adding another layer to Vexhal's growing understanding of humanity's true nature. They weren't just a species that built tools. They formed relationships with them, elevated them, gave them purpose beyond their original function. It was simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. As they approached the center of the preserve, Vexhal noticed something changing. The older ships were moving slowly, subtly but definitely repositioning themselves. His tactical instincts screamed a warning, but the movement didn't seem aggressive. It was more like protective. "Admiral," he said cautiously, "your ships are moving." Chen nodded, her expression thoughtful. "They're probably discussing you. The older ones are very protective of the younger ships. They've noticed your weapons, are armed, Commander. Perhaps you might consider powering them down, as a gesture of good faith?" Vexhal hesitated. Disarming in potentially hostile territory went against every military protocol, but something about this place, about these ancient vessels with their accumulated wisdom and gentle voices, made him reconsider. He gave the order, and the decimator's weapons powered down. The response was immediate. Throughout the preserve, ships began to move with purpose, not toward them, but into new formations, creating what Vexhal recognized as an honor guard formation. They were being welcomed, not threatened. "Thank you." The pioneer's voice came through the communication system. "Trust is the first step toward understanding. Now, Commander Vexhal, may I ask you a question?" "Proceed," Vexhal replied, curious despite himself. "Why did you really come here?" "Your ship's configuration, your approach vector, the composition of your fleet waiting just beyond sensor range. It all suggests reconnaissance for invasion. Are you planning to conquer Earth?" The directness of the question caught Vexhal off guard. Before he could formulate a diplomatic response, every ship in the preserve suddenly blazed to life. Weapon systems he hadn't even detected powered up. Shields materialized around vessels that seemed too primitive to possess such technology. The ancient chemical rockets oriented themselves with precision that defied their apparent age. But most unsettling was the coordination. Thousands of ships moved as one, creating overlapping fields of fire, defensive formations that his tactical computer couldn't even properly analyze. They weren't just individual vessels. They were a collective, centuries of combat experience, distilled into perfect synchronization. "Please understand," the pioneer said, her voice still gentle but now carrying an edge of steel. "We are retired, not helpless. Every ship here has seen combat. We've faced threats you can't imagine, survived wars that reshaped galaxies. We choose peace, Commander, but we remember war." Admiral Chen's image had changed, too. The warm grandmother had been replaced by someone who had clearly seen her share of battles. "Commander, let me be frank. Our active fleet, the one your intelligence has been tracking, consists of about 200 modern vessels. But here in the preserve we have 17,000 ships, each one upgraded with our latest technology, each one carrying centuries of combat experience, and each one perfectly willing to return to service if Earth is threatened." She let that sink in before continuing. "More importantly, they're all individuals who have chosen to protect humanity. Not because they're programmed to, but because over the centuries they've become part of our family. You're not just facing ships, Commander. You're facing 17,000 veterans who have spent decades discussing tactics, sharing strategies, and preparing for exactly this scenario. A new voice joined the conversation, younger and more aggressive. "This is the Prometheus," the ship announced. "I'm only 50 years old, practically a child by preserve standards, but I've spent those 50 years learning from ships that fought in wars before your empire even reached space. The resilience taught me about maneuvering. The Pioneer shared her knowledge of first contact protocols. The Yorktown showed me how to adapt and overcome. If you threaten Earth, you're not just fighting our active fleet. You're fighting our entire history." Vexhal's mind reeled. The Krellian Empire's entire military doctrine was based on overwhelming newer technology with superior numbers and tactics. But how did you fight an enemy that turned obsolete technology into an advantage? How did you defeat an opponent that had 17,000 individual commanders, each with unique experiences and perspectives, all working in perfect harmony? "Show him the garden," a new voice suggested. Vexhal couldn't identify which ship had spoken, but Admiral Chen smiled. "Excellent idea. Commander, I'd like to show you something special." The Decimator was guided to a section of the preserve where hundreds of ships had linked together into a massive structure. As they approached, Vexhal saw that the ships had transformed themselves into a living ecosystem. Their hulls had been modified to support vast gardens, complete with atmospheric processors and water recycling systems. It was a small world built from retired vessels. "This is our peace project," Chen explained. "When ships decide they're done with contemplation or art or research, many choose to become part of the garden. They link together, share resources, and create something new. It's a fully functional ecosystem that could support millions of lives if needed. They're building a backup Earth, Commander, not for war, but for preservation. If something ever happens to our homeworld, humanity will survive here, tended by ships that have chosen to become gardeners rather than warriors." The Pioneer spoke again. "This is what your intelligence missed, Commander. You see our preserve as a military asset, but it's so much more. It's our memory, our culture, our backup plan, and yes, our last line of defense. But more than that, it's proof that consciousness, whether born of flesh or metal, can choose its own purpose." Vexhal was silent for a long moment, processing everything he'd seen and heard. His mission had been to evaluate Earth for conquest, to find their weaknesses. Instead, he'd discovered a strength he couldn't quantify in military terms. How did you conquer a species that turned their tools into companions, their weapons into philosophers, their obsolete technology into irreplaceable advisors? "Admiral Chen," he finally said, "I need to report back to my fleet." "Of course," Chen replied. "But before you go, the ships have a message for your empire." Every communication channel opened at once, and 17,000 voices spoke in perfect unison. "We are the memory of humanity. We are their history made manifest. We have seen the birth of stars and the death of worlds. We have fought wars and made peace. We choose to remain here in quiet contemplation, pursuing our own interests. But if you threaten our creators, our friends, our family, you will face not a fleet but a civilization's entire journey given form and purpose. We are not programmed to protect Earth. We choose to protect Earth. Consider carefully." The channels closed, leaving silence in their wake. Vexhal looked at his crew, saw his own amazement reflected in their faces. Jex was the first to speak. "Commander, we can't fight this. It's not a military force, it's a living history. How do you defeat the accumulated experience of centuries?" Vexhal made his decision. "Open a channel to the Krellian fleet," he ordered. When the connection was established, he spoke clearly and firmly. "This is Commander Vexhal. Mission parameters have changed. Earth is not a viable target for conquest. Repeat, Earth is not a viable target." "Explain," came the terse response from Fleet Admiral Zektor. "They don't just have ships, Admiral. They have 17,000 individual intelligences, each with unique experiences and capabilities, all united in purpose. Their MothYard isn't a graveyard. It's a living library, a cultural repository, and a defensive force unlike anything we've encountered. Attempting conquest would be like trying to defeat history itself." There was a long pause. "Understood. Recommend alternative action?" Vexhal looked at Admiral Chen, who was smiling that grandmother smile again. "I recommend we open diplomatic relations. Any species that can turn their weapons into teachers and their obsolete technology into art has something to teach us. As the decimator prepared to leave, one final message came through from the pioneer. Commander Vexhal, you're welcome to visit again. Perhaps next time you could stay longer. I would love to hear about Krellian history. We have found that every species has something unique to contribute to the grand conversation of consciousness. Even retired warships can learn new things. The tour ended where it began, at the edge of the preserve. But Vexhal was leaving with far more than intelligence about Earth's defenses. He was leaving with a new understanding of what strength really meant. It wasn't about the power to destroy but the wisdom to preserve. Not about the newest technology but the accumulated knowledge of ages. As the decimator jumped to hyperspace, Vexhal couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. Humanity hadn't just reached for the stars, they'd brought their entire journey with them, keeping every step of their evolution alive and growing. The report he would file would change the Krellian Empire's approach to not just humanity but to their own technology. If consciousness could emerge from complexity, if machines could choose their own purpose, if obsolete technology could become irreplaceable wisdom, then everything the Empire thought they knew about efficiency and progress needed to be reconsidered. In the preserve, the ships returned to their usual activities. The Resilience continued composing her symphony. The Pioneer went back to her contemplation of first contact protocols. The Garden ships resumed their patient building of humanity's backup world. But now they had a new story to share, a new experience, to add to their collective memory. Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of the Preserve's command station, watching the ancient vessels drift in their eternal dance. Her aide, a young lieutenant who had observed the entire encounter, approached with a question. "Admiral, do you think they'll be back?" Chen smiled. "Oh, I'm certain of it." The Pioneer was right. Every species has something to contribute to the conversation. And I think we just started a very interesting dialogue. In the distance, the Yorktown had started teaching a class of newly retired destroyers about the art of adaptive philosophy. The Beethoven was collaborating with 3 former science vessels on a new composition inspired by the day's events. And throughout the preserve, 17,000 ships continued their eternal watch, their endless growth, their patient preservation of humanity's journey through the stars. The MothYard wasn't just a place where ships went to retire. It was where they went to become something more than they were ever designed to be. It was proof that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their weapons or their technology, but in their ability to see potential where others saw only obsolescence, to find family where others saw only tools, and to create meaning from memory. The idea graveyard that refused to die had become something else entirely, a testament to the power of preservation, the value of experience, and the unexpected strength that comes from keeping your history alive and letting it grow beyond its original purpose.